Did you know that America, which makes up only 5% of the world's population, houses nearly 25% of the world's prisoners? Quite a shocking reality, isn't it? Imagine 1 in every 4 prisoners in the world is incarcerated in the land of the free and the home of the brave. This is not a recent phenomenon but a result of centuries of systemic issues embedded deep within the American judicial system. To illustrate, let's consider the case of Richard, a man who was sentenced to life in prison for stealing a $159 jacket. This happened under the 3 strikes law, designed to deter repeat offenders. It's a law that has been criticized for its harsh application in minor offenses like Richard's, where the punishment seems to far outweigh the crime. The United States, a nation celebrated for its ideals of freedom and justice, paradoxically holds the dubious distinction of having the highest incarceration rate in the world. This is no title earned overnight but rather the culmination of a dark and complex history, a history that we will delve into over the course of this video. The American prison system, as it stands today, is a labyrinth of contradictions. It is a system that often is more focused on punishment than on reform, a system that disproportionately affects the poor and the marginalized, a system that, for many, feels more like a trap than a tool for justice. But it's crucial to note that not all criminals are equal. Some prisoners indeed deserve harsh treatment due to the severity of their crimes, while others, like Richard, languish behind bars for minor offenses, subjected to extreme penalties that far outweigh their mistakes. This disparity is another glaring issue that needs to be addressed in our journey towards a more balanced and fair judicial system. But how did we get here? How did a country founded on the principles of liberty and justice end up imprisoning a quarter of the world's inmates? It's a twisted tale, filled power, politics, and prejudice. A tale that we've largely kept hidden from the public eye. In this video, we will pull back the curtain on this unspoken history. We will trace the evolution of the American jail system, from its birth in the colonial era to its unprecedented expansion in the modern day. We will explore the policies and practices that have shaped this system, and devastating effects they have had on countless lives like Richard's. This is not a story for the faint of heart. It is a story of injustice, inequality, and inhumanity. But it is a story that needs to be told, for the sake of those who have been silenced, and for the sake of a future where justice truly prevails. Prepare yourself, as we begin to uncover the truth about the American jail system. Let's dive into the past and see how it all began. Our journey begins in the late 1700s, with the birth of the Penitentiary Concept. This was a period when revolutionary ideas were challenging traditional beliefs and practices. Among these was the idea that criminals could be reformed, not just punished. This belief in rehabilitation was the seed from which the penitentiary concept sprouted. The penitentiary concept was a radical departure from the prevalent punitive methods of the time. It marked a shift from corporal punishment, which relied on physical pain and public humiliation, to imprisonment. The aim was not just to punish but to reform the offender. The concept was built on the belief that isolation and labor could lead to penance and reform. Imagine, if you will, a world where criminals were no longer whipped or hanged publicly, but were instead sent to these penitentiaries. These were not the overcrowded, underfunded institutions we see today. They were designed with the idea of solitary confinement, where each prisoner would have their own cell, their own workspace. The belief was that such isolation would lead to introspection, and hard labor would instill discipline. And so the first penitentiaries were constructed. One of the earliest was the Walnut Street Jail in Philadelphia, which opened its doors in 1790. It was followed by others like the New York Auburn system and the Pennsylvania system. These institutions were hailed as progressive, a sign of humanity's advancement. They represented a shift towards a more compassionate society, one that believed in giving individuals a chance to reform and reintegrate into society. But the path to hell is often paved with good intentions. As noble as the initial intentions were, the penitentiary system was soon to reveal a darker side. The hope of reforming criminals into productive members of society would soon be overshadowed by a more sinister reality. A reality that continues to haunt us to this day. But as we'll see, these noble intentions would soon give way to a more sinister reality. Fast forward to the 19th century, a time of industrial revolution and, unfortunately, exploitation within the prison system. This era was marked by the rapid growth of industry, but beneath the progress and innovation, there was a sinister underbelly. As the country expanded, so too did its reliance on a system known as convict leasing. This practice was essentially a form of legalized slavery, where prisoners were leased out to work in various industries such as plantations, mines, and railroad companies. Convict leasing was a lucrative business. It provided cheap labor for burgeoning industries, and it offered a solution to overcrowded prisons. However, it was a system riddled with abuse and inhumanity. Prisoners were subjected to grueling work schedules, often from dawn to dusk, with little regard for their health or safety. They lived in squalid conditions, were poorly fed, and received minimal medical care. The death rate among leased convicts was alarmingly high. It's estimated that in some states, nearly 1 in 4 leased convicts died while under contract. These deaths were a grim testament to the brutal conditions and lack of regard for human life that characterized this system. Despite public outcry and growing concern over the inhumane treatment of prisoners, convict leasing continued well into the 20th century in some states. It was a system built on exploitation and cruelty, underpinned by the belief that prisoners were less than human and deserved no better. But the story doesn't end there. The legacy of convict leasing is still felt today, in the form of prison labor and the mass incarceration that feeds it. The echoes of this exploitative system can be heard in modern debates about the role and purpose of the American prison system. The era of exploitation was a dark chapter in the history of American jails, but sadly it was far from the end. In the 20th century, America saw a boom in prison populations, leading to the warehousing of prisoners and the rise of the prison industrial complex. The turn of the century brought with it a new era in incarceration, marked by an unprecedented increase in the number of people behind bars. This uptick was largely fueled by policies such as the war on drugs, which led to the criminalization of minor drug offenses and the imposition of mandatory minimum sentences. This new approach to crime and punishment transformed prisons into overcrowded warehouses for human beings. In a system bursting at the seams, the quality of life for inmates significantly diminished, with many prisons struggling to provide basic necessities. The overcrowded conditions also made it exceedingly difficult to focus on rehabilitation, with the emphasis shifting towards punitive measures. Around the same time, another transformation was taking place. The management of prisons was increasingly being handed over to private corporations. The privatization of prisons brought a profit motive into a realm that had previously been the sole responsibility of the state. This in turn led to cost-cutting measures that often came at the expense of the welfare of the inmates. And then, there's the issue of inmate labor. Often compared to modern-day slavery, the exploitation of inmate labor is a practice deeply entrenched in the American prison system. With inmates earning pennies on the dollar for their work, prison industries have become a lucrative business. This practice, deeply rooted in the era of chain gangs and convict leasing, continues to be a contentious issue. Critics argue that it perpetuates a cycle of poverty and crime, with inmates leaving prison with little to no savings or job prospects. The history of American jails is a stark reminder of the systemic issues that persist today. The warehousing of prisoners, the rise of the prison industrial complex, and the exploitation of inmate labor are all part of a system in need of drastic overhaul. It's a dark history, one that challenges us to question the very nature of justice and punishment in our society. One policy that significantly contributed to the dark history of American jails is the 3 strikes rule. Enacted in the 1990s, this law mandates a life sentence for offenders convicted of serious violent felonies on 3 separate occasions. The intention was to keep repeat offenders off the streets, but the outcome was far more complex. The 3 strikes rule led to a surge in prison populations, contributing to overcrowding and warehousing of prisoners that we discussed earlier. In fact, many non-violent offenders found themselves serving life sentences due to this rule, a consequence many argue is excessively harsh. Take for instance the case of Leandro Andrade. He was sentenced to 50 years without parole for shoplifting 9 children's videotapes, a non-violent crime. His previous non-violent offenses triggered the 3 strikes rule, leading to his harsh sentence. Critics also point out that the 3 strikes rule has disproportionately impacted minority communities, further entrenching systemic racial disparities within the American judicial system. The 3 strikes rule is a stark example of the punitive approach that has come to define the American judicial system, contributing significantly to the history of American jails. It serves as a reminder of the need for reform, for a system that prioritizes rehabilitation over punishment and justice over retribution. Now that you know the dark history of American jails, what can you do about it? The answer is simple, yet profound. Spread awareness. ignite conversations about the reality of our prison system, support initiatives aimed at prison reform, and educate others about the chilling history and present state of American jails. Remember, knowledge is power, and your voice matters. Together, we can shed light on the dark history of American jails and work towards a more just future. As we conclude, remember that knowledge is power. Share this video with your friends, family, and social networks. Encourage them to join the conversation and learn more about the complexities inherent in our justice system. Every share, every comment, every like, and every subscription helps spread the message and brings us one step closer to a deeper understanding of the legal system's intricacies. It's not just about effecting change, it's about understanding why the change is necessary. So, if you found this video informative and enlightening, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content like this. Together we can foster a deeper understanding and make a difference.